Welcome back to Hidden Oaks Homestead. We're finally back outside in the garden. We never really stopped so much because we have winter crops here in Florida that grow as well, but it's spring. Our last freeze is over and we're able to get our summer crops slowly but surely out here into the garden. We tried out gardening a few times before we got to the homestead. Then, when we got here in March of 2020, we really had not much to work with. Everything was wooded. We didn't have any amended soil. Florida soil, if you live around here, is sand and clay, so you really need to amend the soil to be able to grow in the ground directly. For us, raised bed gardening was the way to go. We bought 4 prefabricated raised garden beds that we then filled Hügelkultur style with logs and yard debris and potting soil and everything else that we could find to immediately be able to garden. We have cucumbers, we have peppers, we have sunflowers, you see those? We have some zucchini, and we have some spaghetti squash, and we have some greens. So we have quite a bit growing, and it's doing better than expected. We didn't expect much out of it. Our first year was not a great yield year for us just because we got a late start. We didn't get here till March. We didn't start seeds until mid-March. We really didn't get anything in the ground until probably end of April, and by then we've already missed a lot of the gardening season for that year. So we didn't get a lot out of it. Last year we started earlier. We got things into the ground earlier. We added additional raised garden beds, and we also tried our hand with in-ground gardening. It was an okay yield, but not as much as we would like. So this year we went even bigger. We staked out an in-ground garden area that we amended the soil in. We tilled everything in. There's a lot of composted manure. The water lines that we laid are not permanent. They are drip lines that we got at the local box store, which seem to be working fairly well for now. As we go down our path a little bit further with our gardening journey, we'll see what we'll do, whether we keep that in-ground garden, whether we keep that watering system, and what works. Reasoning behind a watering system is for us that I am gone a lot for travel, and I need to be able to water my plants no matter if I'm around or not. So I needed something that we can automate as much as possible so that I know my plants are fed and watered whether I'm here or not. When you're a first-time gardener, there is so much information out there that can be really confusing. I suggest trying to reach out to your local extension office to see which crops grow the best for your area, because there are going to be things that you might want to grow that are just not going to do well where you are, no matter what it is. The last thing you want to do is spend your first year gardening and being completely discouraged because you try to grow things that just don't do well where you are. This is from our own seed saving. So far so good. The beans have come up. That lauky squash is really coming along. So we'll see how it turns out. For this year's spring garden, I started seeds at the beginning of January, end of December, to really give it a booster and a way to establish root structure ahead of time before I'm planting it in the garden. I started with tomatoes, with cucumbers, with beans, with peppers. Peppers take a little bit longer to get established, so you want to give them a start super early to be able to transplant them into the ground once the ground really heats up, which is around end of March, beginning of April for us here in 8B in North Florida. This is our third spring season here, and we have added additional raised beds, we have added more trellises, and we have added more space for in-ground gardening. We're going to be doing a lot of experimenting this year to see what does good where and what makes the most sense where. In addition to that, I wanted to add an extra square footage for herb gardening as well. The peppers and the tomatoes that we started for this gardening season, I started at the beginning of January, end of December, to really give them some time to establish a good root structure before I transplant them out here. I started them in a regular seed tray initially and just up-potted them to give them more room to establish more root structure and grow a little bit healthier before I put them out here in the Florida sun. And I'm hoping that I'm giving them a good start to really be successful this gardening season. This year we are growing a couple of different varieties of tomatoes. One of the new varieties that we're trying out this year are Everglade tomatoes. If you haven't heard about it and you are in our growing zone 8B and up, warmer climates, the Everglade tomatoes do extremely well from what we've heard. So we're trying them out and giving them a chance to see how they do. They're smaller sized, cherry-sized tomatoes, and they are supposed to do extremely well in our soil that we have here. Another thing we're trying out for the first time this year are potatoes, so wish us luck on that. And we are growing a bunch more different kind of peppers. I'm very excited about that. I'm not growing a market garden to be selling at the farmer's market. My main priority right now is to be able to grow as much of our own food as I can so that we always have something in the pantry. Over the last 2 years of us being here on the homestead, I've been able to grow a lot of our own food. We've been able to fill up our pantries, can away, ferment, and preserve food in other ways to be kept in the pantry so that we have food throughout the year. I've been very lucky to not have had to go to the grocery store for vegetables. I still have to go for fruit because our orchard is still growing, so we have a little bit of time on our hands for that. But when it comes to vegetables and greens and even herbs, we are set. There's no reason for us to go to the grocery for greens, for cabbage, for sauerkraut, for peppers, even for tomato sauce and things like that. We are set. Our pantries are full, and that's how I like to keep it. If you're on your gardening journey for the first time, I would definitely suggest to grow things that you are going to eat and that you want to get good at growing. Some staples that do really well and are easy to grow are definitely tomatoes and cucumbers and any kind of leafy greens. So if you've never gardened before, those are great ways to start out and really see a reward coming back to you immediately. I'm working with about 2,000 square feet of gardening space this year between the raised beds, the trellises, and the in-ground. Now, you do not need that amount of space to be successfully growing for yourself and for your family. Everything that I do here on an experimental base, you can grow in containers on your balcony, in your house, so you do not need a huge garden to be able to produce for yourself and for your family. I started a lot of things this year that I am willing to lose over the course of this gardening season. I planted enough to be able to experiment a little bit, to see what does well in ground, what does well in the raised garden, what does well in containers, and what works well for me to be able to maintain. So I have a lot of tomatoes and peppers started that I hope are going to make it in different scenarios, but I'm willing to lose some to experiment around. Another thing I'm trying out this year are a couple of new crops that are supposed to be doing really well in this area as even a perennial. So I'm going to give those a try and see if I can get them through the winter to make it into next year as well. All you need for a garden is some dirt and your hands and a little bit of water. That's it. It doesn't need to be an immense space. You can grow it wherever you want. If it's on your kitchen counter, that's where it is. I definitely suggest to start one if you haven't. The food is amazing and the taste, you've never had anything better. As I'm learning on my gardening journey, I would love to hear from you to see what has worked, what hasn't worked, what have been some of the struggles, so that I can apply what you have learned in my gardening journey as well. I hope the video has given you a little bit of perspective on what can be done, what you can do on your scale, what we have been able to do so far here. I hope it encourages you to start growing your own food as well. I will see you in the next video. Grow and get dirty.